My name is Morten Lauridsen. I'm a distinguished professor of composition at the Thornton School of Music at the University of Southern California. I've been associated with this university both as a student and a faculty for now 52 years. And I'm happy to talk with you today. It's unusual for me to think about my coming down to USC when I'm 19 years old, back in 1963, as a fledgling, never having composed a note up to that point, being led into a composition class by the great composer and musicologist Halsey Stevens, conditionally, for one semester in a beginning composition class, to see if I could cut it. And I had transferred from a very fine school, Whitman College in Washington. But after an experience on a lookout and a period of prolonged solitude on a tower in the wilds of Washington State for 10 weeks alone, realizing that music needed to be a large part of my life in it. When I began my education at Whitman College, I took no music at all. I have many interests: poetry, history, many things. And I thought that music would be an avocation. And I realized on the lookout that it needed to be more than that. It needed to be a big part of my life, and I simply went back to Whitty and took every class I could in music, and then realized that if I were to be in music, I think it might be a good idea to come down to where the action was in a large urban setting so I could hear concerts and be taught by a larger school of music, and so many people had recommended USC, so I actually flew down, went to classes, interviewed, and transferred, much to the angst of my parents, who were not happy with this particular decision and were wishing that I had stayed at Whitman College, where I was doing fine there. But it was not at the top of their list for their son to get into his '53 Buick and go down to Los Angeles to become a musician. I heard no clicking of heels at that particular point. In fact, my mother's parting words, which still resound after half a century in my ear: if it doesn't work out, you can always return, come home, and eat crow. And my response to that was, there is something inside of me that says I have to go into music and that I need to go where it was happening. And I may not succeed, but I have to give it a shot. I'm going to go down there. I don't know what I'm going to do musically. I was a piano player, and I was a good one. I was a fair to middling trumpet player. I didn't think that I wanted to be a performer full-time. I didn't want to do that. I didn't know. So I came down to USC, trusting the faculty to help me sort it out. And I got with a couple of people. We rented a very cheap house in a very awful section of Los Angeles that we called Wacky Manor. I lived there for 5 years. Kept afloat by hawking my trumpet or my typewriter, depending upon whether I needed to play a gig or do a term paper, and studied very, very hard and was taught very, very well. And I told my mother, I said, crow's not on my menu. I may come back here, I may not succeed, but I'm not going to be an old man thinking, I wish I had been brave enough as a young man to go down there and give it my very best shot. And when I came down here, I was surrounded by gifted students. You can imagine taking a class in keyboard harmony on a bunch of out-of-tune upright pianos in a Quonset hut down here, and you have Michael Tilson Thomas on one side and Martin Katz on the other side of you. And you're playing figured bass, you're playing modulating sequences, you're doing all this kind of stuff. And this is the reason I came down here, was pushed every bit as much by my gifted colleagues as students as the faculty. So I studied hard. I had a lot of catching up to do. I probably was the greenest student that ever showed up at this place. Professor Halsey Stevens, who gave me that opportunity for one semester, all those years ago, to take a beginning composition class. Years later, I succeeded him as chair of the composition department. And when the man got Parkinson's, for the last 10 years of his life, he asked me to go into his studio to find beginnings of pieces that he had started when he was healthy, and if I could finish it for him in his style. And so when one hears his viola concerto, his 7th piano sonatina, his 4 songs of love and death, his Venite Exultimus, etc., they all have his name on them. It says edited by Morten Lauridsen. He heard them all. He could never tell where he ended and I began. And it was a way of paying him back for the opportunity that he gave me, a young man from Oregon, coming down here to try and make it happen in music.